Not every car is welcome in America. Over the years, dozens of foreign vehicles were banned from U.S. roads, not because they were slow or ugly, but because they broke the rules. From failing strict safety tests to ignoring emissions laws, these cars clashed with American regulations. Some were too fast, others too toxic, and a few were just too dangerous to trust. Let's uncover why these foreign cars were denied entry into the United States. Number 5. Built in Blackpool, England, the TVR 3000M of the 1970s and later the wild TVR Sagaris in the 2000s were brutally fast, fiercely independent, and dangerously unforgiving. They were pure driver's machines, but that purity came at a cost: safety. These cars had no airbags, no ABS, and never underwent official crash testing. Why? Because TVR refused to equip their cars with electronic safety systems. Their philosophy was simple. That attitude might work on a racetrack, but in America, regulations are strict. U.S. safety laws require crash test certifications, airbags, and modern impact protections. Without these, the TVR 3000M and Sagaris were banned from U.S. roads, and for good reason. These cars were notoriously dangerous for inexperienced drivers. Lightweight bodies, high horsepower, and no driver aids meant one wrong move could be your last. Here's a fact: the TVR Sagaris could hit 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, powered by a 400-plus horsepower straight six, and yet it had no traction control whatsoever. It was practically a missile on wheels. The TVR 3000M and Sagaris were brilliant, terrifying, and too dangerous for America. They didn't believe in protecting the driver, only challenging them. Number 4. The Citroën SM, one of the most advanced and ambitious cars of the 1970s. Designed and built in France, this sleek Grand Tourer combined luxury, science fiction styling, and a heart from Italy, a Maserati engine under the hood. But in America, this car was banned. So, what made it illegal? First, the hydraulic self-centering steering. It returned the wheel to center on its own, revolutionary for the time, but it violated U.S. safety standards, which required more predictable driver control during emergency maneuvers. The SM featured self-leveling, swiveling headlights that turned with the steering wheel. Amazing in the Alps, but not compliant with NHTSA rules at the time. These features, along with its non-standard bumper design and complex suspension system, made the SM impossible to certify under U.S. regulations. Despite initial imports, Citroën pulled out of the American market by 1974. Here's a fact. The SM was powered by a Maserati V6 engine, as Citroën owned Maserati at the time. But this engine was notoriously hard to service, especially for U.S. mechanics unfamiliar with French-Italian engineering. The Citroën SM was beautiful, fast, and decades ahead of its time. But its complexity, combined with strict American laws, doomed its future in the U.S. market. It was a luxury spaceship on wheels, and for a few short years, it stunned the world. But for America, the Citroën SM was just too strange, too smart, and too illegal. Number 3, the Peugeot 205 GTI, a lightweight, nimble, high-revving hot hatch that became a legend across Europe in the 1980s. Built in France by Peugeot, it was raw, responsive, and affordable. But in the United States, it never stood a chance. Why was it banned? For one, U.S. crash test and safety standards were far stricter. The 205 GTI was never certified to meet them. It lacked airbags, reinforced bumpers, and side impact protection required by American law. Second, it didn't fit the American market. With its manual-only transmission, compact size, and tight suspension, the GTI was built for narrow European streets, not wide American highways and commuter culture. And while that made it a dream on twisty roads, it also meant that in a crash, it wasn't very forgiving. At just around 900 kilograms, 2,000 pounds, the car offered minimal protection in collisions. Here's a fact. Despite being banned in the U.S., the Peugeot 205 GTI is often called the greatest hot hatch of all time in Europe, praised for its perfect balance, sharp handling, and thrilling drive. It was small, fast, and fearless. The Peugeot 205 GTI might have ruled the roads in Europe, but in America, it was just too risky, too raw, and officially unwanted. Number 2. the Lancia Delta Integrale, one of the most dominant rally cars of all time. Built in Italy by Lancia, this turbocharged all-wheel drive hatchback wasn't just fast, it was a legend on dirt, snow, and asphalt. Between 1987 and 1994, the Delta Integrale won 6 consecutive World Rally Championships. But despite its global fame, it was never sold in the United States. The reason? U.S. safety and emissions regulations. The Delta Integrale lacked airbags, didn't meet federal crash test standards, and its turbocharged engine failed to comply with strict U.S. emission laws of the time. Imming one meant expensive modifications or facing legal issues. For most American enthusiasts, owning a Delta was simply out of reach, unless they waited 25 years for it to become legal as a classic. Here's a fact. Despite never being sold in the US, the Lancia Delta Integrale is considered one of the greatest performance cars of the 20th century, with razor-sharp handling, rally-proven engineering, and unmistakable Italian style. But with that performance came risk. The Integrale was raw and aggressive, with turbo lag and no electronic driver aids. In the wrong hands, it could be a handful, even dangerous. The Lancia Delta Integrale never made it to American showrooms, but its reputation? It crossed every border, becoming a rally-bred outlaw that still turns heads today. Number 1. Nicknamed Godzilla by the Australian press, the Nissan Skyline GT-R R32 was Japan's answer to the European supercar. Built from 1989 to 1994, it redefined performance. Intelligent all-wheel drive, twin-turbo power, and ruthless track dominance. But in the United States, it was banned. The R32 was never sold in America because it failed to meet Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, FMVSS, particularly crash testing and emissions requirements. It lacked US-approved airbags, impact protection, and EPA-certified emissions equipment, and its RB26 DETT twin-turbo inline-6 wasn't designed to meet America's strict pollution laws. So even though it could outrun Ferraris and Porsches, it couldn't pass US bureaucracy. For years, owning one in the US meant gray market imports, legal loopholes, or outright risk. It wasn't until the 25-year rule kicked in that fans could legally own and drive the R32 GT-R. Here's a fact. The R32 won 29 out of 29 races in Japan's Group A touring car series. It was so dominant, racing officials eventually banned it from competition, just like US regulators did from the streets. The Nissan Skyline GT-R R32 was never meant to be tamed. It was born to dominate, and for America, it was simply too wild, too fast, and too far ahead of its time.